And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Who is able to make war with him?
Hello, I'm David DeBusk, and today, again, I'm coming to you from Texas. To start with, I want to take a moment to personally thank each of you who have subscribed to my channel. Today, that number is over 400. A few weeks ago, I was getting nearly 500 to 1,000 people viewing my channel every day, and then all of a sudden, that number just dropped. We've all heard the stories about how conservative and religious content is being restricted, and I feel certain my channel is no exception. To those of you who are here for the first time, I want to welcome you to our growing family. And in addition, I want to ask you to please become a subscriber. And if you would, hit that like button on your screen. Somehow activity just breeds activity, and it improves the underlying algorithms that are used in recommending my videos to people who are searching for content. Let me remind you that by doing these two simple things, you're helping share God's eternal truth with people from all around the world. People, we read in the book of Daniel, starting with chapter 10 of one of the visions whereby a messenger was sent to him to explain the things that will happen to Israel in the latter days. In chapter 12, Daniel is told the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Centuries have come and gone with the cloak of mystery covering people's understanding of end-time events. Yet knowledge has increased greatly in these last few years, and what was long hidden is now coming into view. Today's headlines are filled with sorrows, increasing disasters such as earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, and floods. Wars and rumors of wars are the subject of nightly news, along with forecasts of coming pandemics, famine, and financial collapse. At the very center stage is the nation of Israel. There is growing support and commitment to rebuild the ancient temple, and in the midst of all these events, the Israeli government is trying to find a solution to deal with enemies who are determined to destroy her. These are the times described in Scripture, foreshadowing the coming of Yeshua and the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. We are witnessing nations coming together to establish a new global order and a digital economy. The Bible's clear. One man will rise with great power, and in his pride he will oppose Yahweh, his word, and his people. He is described as the little horn by Daniel, and he will rise out of a beast system, said to have 7 heads, 10 horns, and wearing 10 crowns. This video will set before you the possible identification of this horrific beast system that was observed by both Daniel and John. Grab you a cup of coffee. Pull up a chair. What I'm about to share with you is breathtaking. Many of you will recall Daniel's account of being brought before King Nebuchadnezzar to interpret and explain the king's troubling dream as recorded in chapter 2 of the book of Daniel. He told him, "In your dream, you saw a colossal statue of what appeared to be a man standing before you. It was bright, shiny, and terrifying to look at." He went on to explain that the head was of fine gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were made of bronze. And lastly, the legs were of iron, with the feet and the toes mixed partly of iron and with clay. Then Daniel states, "You, king of Babylon, are the head of gold. After you will arise another kingdom, Medo-Persia, inferior to you. And then a third kingdom of bronze, which was Greece under Alexander the Great, which will rule over all the earth. Then a fourth kingdom, Rome, will be strong as iron, for iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron, which crushes things in pieces, it will break and crush all these others. And as you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom. But there will be in it some of the durability and the strength of iron, just as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the 10 toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so some of the kingdom will be strong, and another part of it will be brittle. And as you saw the iron mixed with common clay, so they will combine with one another in the seed of men. But they will not merge, for such diverse things or ideologies cannot unite, even as iron does not mix with clay." In Daniel chapter 7, he tells us that he too had a dream. He states, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, which are the nations, and 4 great beasts, each different from the other, were coming up out of the sea in succession." Folks, the 4 winds of heaven are symbolic of Yahweh's divine messengers of judgment being unleashed upon the earth from every direction. Zechariah in chapter 6 defines the 4 winds as the 4 horsemen, which correspond to the 4 horsemen of Revelation chapter 6 as being depicted as the Messiah, war and bloodshed, famine, pestilence, and death. Let me state that some modern-day preachers identify the horseman on the white horse as the Antichrist. I totally disagree. According to 2 Thessalonians, the day of Yahweh will not come until after the departure and the revealing of the son of perdition. With respect to the word departure, some translations state falling away. The Greek word for departure is apostasia. It is interesting to note that translations such as Tyndale, the Matthew's Bible, Wycliffe, the Geneva Bible, and even the recent Literal Standard Version translates apostasia as departure. And the reason for this is because there's no antecedent in the text, such as faith. Paul states that there will be a departure. But from what? In any event, I believe the text is clear that the millennial reign of Messiah begins with the opening of the first seal, Revelation chapter 6, verse 1, also known as the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Thus, Yeshua, by the authority of his Father, goes forth conquering and to conquer. Also, one should note that Antichrist does not receive his authority from heaven. According to Revelation 13:4, it is the dragon, Satan, who gives authority to the beast. Each of the four horsemen are messengers sent from heaven to bring Yahweh's decreed judgment upon the earth. In verse 17 of chapter 7, Daniel tells us that the sea represents the earth. It is the primordial symbol of the forces of chaos and evil, a place inhabited by both monsters and dragons, i.e., it is the sum of all the Gentile nations and their ruthless and wicked leaders who seek to rule the world. Folks, what Daniel saw and envisioned was the loosing of the four winds of heaven upon the sea of humanity, which results in a violent social and political upheaval that stirs up and enrages the Gentile nations. And out of this chaos, a group of nations ultimately form a tyrannical alliance, forming the first geopolitical one-world system of government among the society of nations. With respect to the vision that Daniel had regarding the four beasts that came up from the sea, he states that the first, the Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar, was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one. The Medo-Persian Empire was like a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, "Arise, devour much meat." After this I kept looking, and behold another one, the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings like those of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, which represented Alexander's generals, his successors, and power to rule was given to this beast. After this, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, I saw a 4th beast, the Roman Empire, terrible and extremely strong, and it had huge iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that came before it, and it had 10 horns, 10 kings. C.I. Scofield, who edited and annotated the popular and widely circulated Scofield Study Bible, made the following note regarding the 4 kingdoms observed by both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. He states, Nebuchadnezzar saw the imposing outward power and splendor of the time of the Gentiles, while Daniel saw the true character of Gentile world government as rapacious and warlike, established and maintained by force. It is remarkable that the heraldic insignia of Gentile nations are all beasts or birds of prey. Folks, listen to me very carefully. Rome became a diverse and divided kingdom, characterized by the legs stretching from the east to the west, with the feet and the toes being mixed with both iron and clay. Ancient Rome was divided, yet her political system and culture endures to this day, leaving an indelible mark across multiple continents, including the Americas and Europe. Many modern-day governments are modeled after the Roman Republic. Concepts such as balance of power, veto, and representation all were developed by the Romans. At the center of Roman government was the Senate. It was representative of the Roman people and the repository of Roman sovereignty. Note, the United States Senate is composed of senators, each of whom represent a single state in its entirety. Each of the 50 states is equally represented by 2 senators. Behind and on each side of the Speaker's chair in the U.S. House of Representatives hangs the Roman fasces. A fasces is a bundle of rods, usually birch or elm, bound together by leather straps. It is a symbol of official authority, governmental power, and unity. And the axe symbolizes governmental power over life and death. If you have ever been to Washington, D.C. and visited the Lincoln Memorial, you probably stood in awe at the enormous statue of Abraham Lincoln, memorialized and quietly seated within his temple, with his hands resting on Roman fasces. The eagle was a prominent symbol used in ancient Rome. It was also the minister of Jupiter's thunderbolts and the standard of a Roman legion. A legionary, known as an aquilifer, the eagle bearers, carried the standard presenting Rome as the ideal ruler in the global sphere. Each legion carried one eagle. The eagle was a major symbol of power and authority. Subsequent nations from Poland to the United States, even Nazi Germany, adopted the eagle as their national symbols, both for their intrinsic meaning and in an attempt to invoke the Roman Empire. Note the Roman fasces engraved at the bottom of the seal of the United States Senate and the prominent display of the eagle on the seal of the United States House of Representatives and the official seal of the President of the United States. Then there's the ceremonial Roman mace, stationed to the right of the Speaker's chair. It too is made of rods, bound together with the eagle setting atop a sphere that is said to be representing the Western Hemisphere. However, in ancient days, the ball was a symbol of the cosmos, or the universe as a harmonious whole. The Romans associated it with Jupiter, and hence with the emperor as his earthly representative. On Liberty Island in New York Harbor sits the majestic Statue of Liberty. French sculptor Frederic Bartholdi wanted to use a woman to represent liberty and freedom. He drew his inspiration from the Roman goddess Libertas and Sol Invictus. Sol Invictus, the god of the sun, was one of the most important gods, and he symbolized victory, and he defeated darkness, and he rose every morning. Sol Invictus was the patron of Roman soldiers. Then there's the Colosseum. It is the main symbol of Rome. It is one of the most famous buildings that's ever been built, and it has stood at the center of Rome just east of the Roman Forum for nearly 2,000 years. From ancient Athens to Victorian England to modern America, the Colosseum serves as the father of all modern stadiums. In the book of Revelation, chapter 12, the Apostle John states, "And there appeared another omen in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which is Israel, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born." In the 9th verse, John says, "And the great dragon was cast down, that old serpent, he that is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was cast down to the earth, and his angels were cast down with him." People, I hope you're beginning to understand what Paul meant when he said that Satan is the god of this world. In verse 18, John states, "And then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore." In Revelation chapter 13, John states, "And I saw a beast coming out of the sea," which represents the nations. "And it had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name." In Revelation chapter 17, John says, "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings." Now listen carefully to what John said. He said that the 7 heads are 7 mountains, and they are 7 kings. John continues in chapter 17 stating, "And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen. 1 is, and the other is not yet come." With respect to the 5 that are fallen, that would be Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece. And the one that is, that's Rome. And the one yet to come, the kingdom of Antichrist. This raises a very important question. Who or what is represented by the 10 horns and the 10 crowns? In the 7th chapter of Daniel, he states, "I considered the 10 horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots." Then Daniel continues in verses 19 and 20, stating, "Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell." Then Daniel continues in verse 24 and says, "And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings." The New Life Version says that he will put 3 kings under his power. Now this is interesting. We have 10 kings, but one of those kings has put 3 of those kings under his power. In Revelation chapter 17, the Apostle John says the same thing that Daniel did when he states, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings." But then he says, "which have received no kingdom as yet." Then he goes on to say, "but receive power as kings for 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb." Note that John tells us that the 10 kings receive power with the beast for 1 hour. Now you will recall where Peter states that 1 day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. If you divide 1,000 years by the number 24, which represents the number of hours in a day, you will come up with 41.666 months, which equates to 42 months. 1,260 days are 3.5 years. Now, John is telling us that these 10 kings will give their power and strength to Antichrist at the midpoint of the tribulation by confirming a covenant and forming some sort of national alliance and the formation of the last worldly kingdom. What event will trigger this alliance? I don't know. Will it be an economic collapse, an environmental disaster, or war? Again, It was John who said that he saw this beast coming up out of the sea that had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on each of its horns. Let me ask you a question. Could it be that this horrifying creature, this beast that John saw, could it be the G7, the group of 7 nations? The group of 7, the G7, is an intergovernmental organization made up of the world's largest developed economies. The countries representing those economies are France, Germany, Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Japan. Governmental leaders of these countries meet periodically to address international, economic, and monetary issues, with each member taking over the presidency on a rotating basis. The G7 was formerly referred to as the G8, with Russia as a member. However, Russia was suspended from the group in 2014 after annexing Crimea from the Ukraine. And it should be noted that the European Union, the EU, has participated fully in the G7 since 1981 as a non-enumerated member. It is represented by the presidents of the European Council, which comprises the EU member states' leaders, and of the European Commission, the EU's executive body. Embedded within the G7 are 24 more countries, which doesn't include the United Kingdom and France because they are part of the G7. And with respect to the United Kingdom, add the additional 54 countries that make up what is known as the British Commonwealth, which is a political association of 56 member states, the vast majority of which are former territories of the British Empire. Now, here is where things get really interesting. The Bible tells us that out of the 10 kings or kingdoms, 3 have been subdued, brought under control. Notice that England eventually conquered Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. When you add these 3 countries to the G7, you come up with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. With respect to the vision that Daniel had, he states in chapter 7 that there was another horn, a little one, and there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous, arrogant words. That begs the question, who is the little horn with eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking pompous words? Let me ask you, could it be? Could it be King Charles? Here is a very interesting fact. Certain visiting dignitaries to the United States are given code names by the Secret Service. You're not going to believe this, but the code name for Charles is Unicorn, the mythical beast with 1 horn. The G7 wields tremendous power, both politically and economically. When you incorporate the affiliation of the European Union and the political association of the British Commonwealth, you have a beastly kingdom the likes of which has never been seen in history. So I ask you, what do you think? Is the G7 the beast with the 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you wish, please leave a comment.